It was a warm, sunny afternoon in Willow Creek, Kansas, a small town known for its charm and tight-knit community. The public park was bustling with life. Families enjoyed picnics beneath the tall oak trees, children laughed and played near the swings, and joggers pounded the trail, soaking in the tranquility of the moment. The calm rustling of leaves and the soft ripples of the lake provided a soothing backdrop to the vibrant scene. Among the park's many visitors was Lena Ward, a highly respected African-American civil rights lawyer who had built a career fighting for justice. Today, however, she wasn't working in a courtroom or holding meetings. Instead, Lena decided to take a rare break from her demanding schedule. She sought solace in the park, the simple beauty of nature offering her a much-needed respite from the pressures of her everyday life. Sitting by the lake on a park bench, Lena had a thick hardcover book resting on her lap, her fingers tracing the lines of text. She was immersed in her reading, her mind temporarily escaping the whirlwind of cases and deadlines that defined her life. The pages of the book held her attention, but even in this peaceful moment, her sharp mind remained alert, constantly processing, analyzing and observing the world around her. As she sat there, Lena couldn't help but feel a sense of calm she rarely had the chance to experience. In the midst of the busy park, surrounded by the sounds of families laughing and playing, she found a moment of peace, just for herself. For once, she was not Lena Ward, the fierce lawyer. She was simply a woman enjoying the serenity of a beautiful day. But little did Lena know, this quiet afternoon would soon be shattered by an unexpected confrontation that would alter the course of her life. The events that would unfold would take her from this peaceful lake to the heart of a battle for justice, and she would find herself at the center of a story that would captivate the entire town of Willow Creek. The warm afternoon was suddenly interrupted by the screech of tires as two police cruisers pulled up near the park entrance. Officer Kyle Jacobs, a tall, broad-shouldered man, and Officer Lisa Grant, a sharp-eyed woman in her mid-30s, stepped out of the vehicles. They scanned the area, their eyes quickly finding Lena Ward, sitting alone by the lake, engrossed in her book. The park was busy with families and children, but their gaze immediately fell on Lena, who appeared to be the only person alone. Despite the calm surroundings, something about Lena's presence seemed to trigger their attention. The officers exchanged a brief look, and then began walking in her direction. As they approached, Lena didn't seem to notice them at first, her focus still on the pages of her book. Officer Jacobs, a seasoned officer who had been on the force for over 5 years, spoke first, his voice loud and authoritative. "Ma'am, we need to talk to you for a moment," he said, his tone firm and suspicious, as if something was amiss. Lena looked up, her calm demeanor unshaken. She closed her book slowly and turned her gaze toward the officers, raising an eyebrow. "Of course, officer. What can I help you with?" Officer Grant stepped forward, her expression unreadable, as she glanced at Lena and then the surrounding park. "We got a call about suspicious activity in the area. You're here alone, acting suspiciously, and we need to see some ID." Lena paused for a moment, considering the bizarre nature of the request. "Suspicious activity? I'm just sitting here reading a book by the lake. I'm not sure what you're referring to," she replied, her voice calm but tinged with confusion. The officers seemed unmoved by her question, their scrutiny growing more intense. "Just show us your ID. It's routine," Officer Jacobs insisted. Lena's pulse quickened, but she didn't let her emotions show. Instead, she inhaled deeply and reached into her bag to pull out her wallet. "I'll be happy to provide my identification, but I still don't understand why I'm being questioned," she said, her voice steady and measured, without a hint of anger. As she handed over her driver's license, the officers barely acknowledged her polite inquiry. They took the ID, scrutinizing it as if searching for something out of the ordinary. Lena had always known how to handle tense situations, but this felt different. The weight of the situation began to settle in, but she didn't let it rattle her. The situation quickly escalated as Lena, still sitting calmly on the bench, tried to explain herself. Officer Jacobs, his expression hardening, leaned in closer and demanded, "Where are you from exactly? Who are you meeting here?" His voice was sharp, carrying an edge of suspicion. Officer Grant crossed her arms, glancing around the park, as if expecting Lena to give an answer she didn't owe them. Lena, her patience thinning but maintaining her composure, shook her head slowly. I'm from Willow Creek, and I'm just here to enjoy a peaceful afternoon. I'm not meeting anyone. Is there anything else you need? Her voice remained calm, but the tension in the air was thickening. Officer Jacobs' lips curled into a sneer as he snapped, "We don't see many people like you around here." The words hung in the air, an unspoken judgment in his tone that felt like a personal attack. Lena felt a knot tighten in her chest, but she knew she couldn't let them provoke her. She straightened her posture, the peaceful serenity of the park feeling increasingly distant. I don't understand why you're asking these questions. I've been respectful, but I'm not answering any more personal questions unless you tell me what I'm being accused of. Without warning, Officer Jacobs lunged forward and grabbed Lena's arm, his grip tight. "You're resisting," he barked. "Stop playing games." Lena's heart skipped a beat, her body tensing at the physical contact. She pulled her arm back instinctively, trying to shake free. "What are you doing?" "Let go of me," she demanded, her voice rising in shock. Before she could react further, she felt the cold sting of handcuffs snap around her wrists, the metal biting into her skin. She couldn't believe this was happening. The humiliation burned in her chest as Officer Jacobs and Grant roughly led her toward their patrol car. A small crowd had gathered, and she could hear the murmurs from the onlookers, some even pulling out their phones to record the incident. The whispers grew louder, and Lena caught snippets of conversations. What did she do? This isn't right. But there was no anger in Lena's eyes, just a quiet, determined calm. She knew this wasn't the time to escalate things further. The world around her felt like it was shrinking, but she refused to show fear. The officers might have been in control of the moment, but she would not let them control her spirit. At the police station, Lena was led into a sterile, cold holding cell, her wrists still sore from the tight handcuffs. The officers who had arrested her seemed to treat the situation with indifference, their voices low as they joked with each other, oblivious to the injustice they had just committed. Lena, however, couldn't shake the sting of humiliation that had washed over her when they had placed her in the holding cell, the fluorescent lights buzzing incessantly above her. Her civil rights had been trampled. She was wrongly charged with resisting arrest and disrupting the peace for no reason other than being an African-American woman sitting in a public park. The invasive booking procedures, fingerprints, photographs, personal questions, felt like a deliberate stripping of her dignity. She could hear her heartbeat thudding in her ears, but she refused to let the situation break her spirit. Despite the overwhelming anger that bubbled inside, Lena took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. She would not let this stand. She knew this wasn't just about her. It was about every person who had been unjustly targeted by the system because of their race. Lena's mind quickly shifted from the anger of the moment to the resolve she needed to move forward. She was determined to fight back, not just for herself, but for the countless others who had been wronged in similar ways. As she sat in the dimly lit room, thoughts of legal action began to form in her mind. This would not end quietly. She had the resources, the knowledge, and the unwavering belief in justice to make sure that what had been done to her was held accountable. The anger would fuel her drive, and the resolve to seek justice burned brighter with each passing second. The moment she was released, the community's response had already started to swell. The video of her arrest had gone viral, and messages of support flooded her inbox from all over the country. People of all backgrounds sent words of encouragement, many sharing their own stories of injustice. Lena could feel the energy building, the weight of the moment shifting from helplessness to action. The public outcry had made it clear she wasn't alone in this fight, and her resolve to seek justice had never been more unshakable. Months passed as Lena poured herself into preparing her civil rights lawsuit against the officers who had wrongfully arrested her. She was determined to hold them accountable, not only for the violation of her own rights, but for the systemic racism that allowed such actions to continue. Her resolve grew stronger every day, fueled by the support of the community and the knowledge that she was fighting for something much bigger than herself. But one fateful afternoon, as Lena sat at her desk reviewing legal documents, she received a call that would shake her to her core. The voice on the other end was her lawyer, and his tone was heavy with disbelief. "Lena, you're not going to believe this," he began. "You've been assigned as the judge for the misconduct hearing involving the 2 officers who arrested you." Lena froze. The words felt like a cruel joke. How could this be? After everything she had been through, she was now expected to preside over a case involving the very officers who had humiliated and unjustly detained her. The irony was staggering. She had spent months preparing to fight them in a courtroom, and now she would have to face them directly as a judge. It was a twist of fate she hadn't anticipated. As the news sank in, Lena found herself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. Could she be impartial? Could she truly put aside the personal nature of the case and render a fair judgment? The thought of facing Officer Kyle Jacobs and Officer Lisa Grant, the same officers who had accused her of loitering and wrongfully arrested her, made her blood boil. But Lena knew that this was a critical moment, not only for her, but for the entire justice system. Her internal struggle was real. Could she let go of the hurt and anger that had been building inside her for months? Lena spent sleepless nights wrestling with these questions, but in the end, she knew what she had to do. This was not just a chance for personal retribution, it was an opportunity for her to show what true justice looked like. The officers who had wronged her would now face the consequences of their actions, and Lena would be the one to ensure that justice prevailed. The day of the trial arrived, and the atmosphere in the courtroom was thick with tension. The room buzzed with hushed whispers as people filed in, the anticipation palpable. At the defendant's table, officers Kyle Jacobs and Lisa Grant sat, their faces rigid with a mix of arrogance and unease. They were no longer in control, and the realization hit them like a freight train. The woman they had wronged, Lena Ward, was now the one in charge of their fate. As Lena entered the courtroom, her black robe flowing behind her, the room fell silent. Her presence was commanding, her expression calm but resolute. It was clear to everyone in the room that this was no ordinary trial. It was a reckoning, not just for the officers, but for the justice system itself. The power dynamic had shifted, and the officers could no longer hide behind their badges. The officers testified one by one, their words faltering and their hands shaking. Officer Jacobs, the one who had physically detained Lena, tried to justify his actions, claiming he acted out of fear and instinct. He admitted that he had overreacted, but he insisted that it was not his fault. His voice wavered as he spoke, unable to maintain the confident facade he had worn so often on the streets. Lena sat silently, her face an unreadable mask as she listened to his weak defense. Inside, however, a storm of frustration brewed. The man who had humiliated her in the park was now trying to avoid accountability by blaming his actions on his own supposed fear. Officer Grant followed, offering a similar defense, but her words lacked conviction. It was clear that neither officer had fully processed the consequences of their actions. They tried to distance themselves from their behavior, offering half-hearted excuses that only further exposed their failure to take responsibility. The trial took an unexpected turn when several witnesses testified. One by one, individuals who had been victims of police misconduct at the hands of the same officers took the stand. Their stories were eerily similar to Lena's. People who had been falsely accused, detained without reason, and subjected to unnecessary aggression. The patterns of abuse were undeniable, and Lena's heart sank as she realized just how widespread the officers' misconduct truly was. For a moment, the weight of the situation hit Lena. This trial was not just about her, it was about confronting a systemic issue that had affected countless others. As she listened to the victims speak, she could feel the weight of their pain, and it only strengthened her resolve. This was no longer just a personal fight, it was a fight for justice on behalf of all those who had been wronged. After days of intense testimony and evidence, the moment had arrived. The courtroom was filled with a heavy silence as Lena sat at the bench, her gaze unwavering. The defendants, officers Jacobs and Grant, sat at the table, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and defiance. The room waited with bated breath, each person keenly aware of the weight of Lena's upcoming judgment. Lena had listened carefully, her mind processing the testimonies and the evidence, but she also knew this was a defining moment, not just for the officers, but for the justice system itself. Lena stood up slowly, her black robe flowing as she made her way to the podium. She took a moment, allowing the gravity of the situation to settle in before speaking. Her voice was steady, commanding, but there was no anger, only the unwavering certainty that the truth needed to be spoken. After careful consideration of the evidence, the testimonies, and the law, Lena began. It is clear that officers Kyle Jacobs and Lisa Grant acted with excessive force during the arrest of Ms. Lena Ward. Their actions were not only unjustified, but they also violated the very principles of law enforcement: integrity, respect, and fairness. Lena's voice rang out in the courtroom, each word resonating with power. The officers who had once walked with such authority now seemed small, deflated in the face of their own reckoning. Therefore, it is my ruling that both officers are guilty of misconduct. The consequences are as follows: indefinite suspension from the force, mandatory retraining in proper use of force and de-escalation techniques, and a permanent mark on their records, ensuring that the public will always know of their actions. A hush fell over the courtroom as the officers exchanged nervous glances. The decision had been made, and there was no turning back. Officer Jacobs, his face pale, stood up from his chair and took a few slow steps toward the bench. His hands trembled slightly as he stood before Lena, his voice barely audible. "Your Honor, I want to apologize," he said, his words laced with sincerity. "I know I acted wrong that day, and I truly regret my actions." Lena looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. She saw something in his eyes that she hadn't expected, a flicker of genuine remorse. Yet despite the apology, Lena knew that words alone would not undo the damage that had been done. She took a deep breath and said, "An apology is a start, but it is not enough. The actions you take moving forward are what will define you now. Change doesn't come through words, it comes through actions." As Officer Jacobs nodded in understanding, Lena struck the gavel, signaling the end of the trial. The courtroom remained still, but the impact of her judgment echoed far beyond the walls of that room. Lena's victory in the courtroom reverberated far beyond the legal community. Her case, which had started as a personal fight for justice, quickly became a symbol of change in Willow Creek and across the state. People from all walks of life, inspired by her bravery, began to speak up about their own experiences with police misconduct. Conversations that were once considered uncomfortable or taboo were now being had openly in living rooms, community centers, and even local businesses. The movement for police reform had gained real momentum, and it was clear that Lena had become the catalyst for something much larger than herself. Her name was no longer just associated with her successful legal career. It was now tied to the fight for accountability and justice. She attended town halls and community meetings, speaking about the importance of police accountability and the need for widespread reform. Her voice, once confined to the walls of courtrooms, now echoed through the streets of Willow Creek. It was clear that Lena had become more than just a lawyer. She had become a beacon of hope for those who had been silenced, a symbol of the change they had long been waiting for. Despite the growing recognition of her work, Lena remained grounded. She took every opportunity to remind the community that this fight was not hers alone. She urged everyone, from local activists to concerned citizens, to stand up for their rights and demand change. "This is not about me," she often said. "It's about all of us. It's about making sure no one is ever made to feel less than or unsafe because of their race or background." In private moments, Lena reflected on her journey. The personal toll had been significant. There were sleepless nights, moments of self-doubt, and times when she wondered if the fight was worth it. But looking at the movement she had ignited, seeing the change she had helped bring about, she knew it was. Lena had faced injustice head-on, and in doing so she had not only changed her own life, but also the lives of countless others in Willow Creek and beyond. Lena stood on the steps of the courthouse, her gaze lingering on the crowd of activists gathered below. Their signs raised high, their voices united in a peaceful rally for justice. The air was charged with a sense of purpose, as the movement that had been ignited by her case continued to grow. As the chants echoed through the streets, Lena couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The battle had been hard, and it had cost her more than she ever expected. But the impact of her victory was undeniable. Yet, as much as she felt accomplished, Lena knew the fight was far from over. While the courtroom battle had ended with a decisive victory, the larger push for social change was just beginning. Lena's case had sparked a conversation, yes, but it was only one small part of a much larger problem. The systemic issues of racial injustice and police misconduct had not disappeared with the judgment, and she knew that true change would require more than a single courtroom victory. There was still so much work to be done, policy changes, educational reforms, and continued activism to ensure that no one else would have to experience the same kind of injustice she had. Lena watched the activists, feeling a quiet determination rising within her. She wasn't just standing there as a bystander, she was a part of this movement, a leader in the fight for a better, more just world. The victory she had won in the courtroom wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had ever faced discrimination, humiliation, or inequality. It was about creating a future where justice truly meant justice for all. The future felt uncertain, but Lena had hope. Hope that the voices of the people would continue to rise, that the system would one day reflect the values of fairness and equality that it so often failed to uphold. She felt a renewed sense of purpose as she joined the rally, walking among the crowd. This fight, she knew, would never be over, but with each step forward, they were one step closer to true justice. The road was long, but Lena was ready to continue leading the charge, fueled by the belief that change begins when people refuse to stay silent. Lena's journey serves as a powerful reminder of the impact one individual can have when they choose to stand up against injustice. Her story is a call to action for anyone who has ever felt silenced or oppressed, to rise, speak out, and fight for what is right. Through her unwavering commitment to justice, Lena has shown that even when the odds are stacked against you, standing firm in your beliefs can spark real change. Her case didn't just result in a victory for herself. It ignited a movement that transcended Willow Creek, spreading across communities and demanding accountability from those entrusted with power. Lena's determination has proven that while the path to justice may be difficult and fraught with challenges, it is through persistence, courage, and unity that true transformation can occur. The fight, however, is far from over. Lena knows that the road to a fairer society will be long, but she remains hopeful. She is confident that as long as people continue to stand together, demanding equality and fairness, change will be inevitable. This is the message Lena carries with her every day, that the power of unity and the collective strength of people who refuse to stay silent can reshape the world. Lena's story encourages everyone to keep fighting, no matter how tough the journey may be, because real change is possible when we come together and speak out for what is right. Lena's story is a profound reminder that injustice cannot be ignored, and standing up against it is essential, even when it feels personal. In real life, we often face moments where silence might seem easier, especially when confronting authority or powerful systems. However, Lena's courage to speak up shows that true change begins with those willing to challenge unfair practices, no matter the cost. It's easy to feel powerless, but as Lena demonstrated, the power of one voice, backed by the support of a community, can make a world of difference. This is a call for us all to recognize our responsibility to each other, to speak up for those who cannot, to demand fairness, and to create a society where justice is not just a concept but a reality. The fight for equality is ongoing, but it starts with each of us choosing to take action in our daily lives.